pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take a roll call. Mr. Guards?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
I'm
Mr. Krupa?
here.
Ms. Mangan?
Here.
Mr. Nasser?
Here.
Mr. Sanfilippo?
Here.
Ms. Stites? Here. Mr. Wondrak? Here. Mr. Adonisio?
He
Has an
is
excused
conflicted.
absence. And there we go. Thank you.
Let's go. Good evening. I wanted to welcome Frank and Mike. It's Frank Orema and Mike Kuchar from SEA here tonight. They are here to report back the findings from the superintendent search surveys. Surveys were closed on 11:30 on February 7th. And so they have been processing data and mining all the golden nuggets and everything like that. So they are going to give our presentation tonight. And with that, I guess we can. Yeah, we're all going to sit so that we can see and follow along.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kuchar. I'm here with my partner, Dr. Frank Orema. We, as the board president mentioned, we closed the search, we closed the survey, and we've conducted our forum interviews. Frank and I first want to say from the beginning, we want to thank everyone for their hospitality, for their openness, for their welcomeness. It's been a rich experience that we've had. We have a great feel for the Wall Township schools, the people in it, and we have a profound respect for the major challenge of finding the next superintendent for the Wall Public Schools and to have the right fit. We really believe it's a watershed moment, that it's a very important decision, that people are deeply invested and interested in ensuring that this is a strong process, that we get the best candidate. Frank and I have been doing this a long time, and we've never seen such involvement. To have over 2,000 surveys submitted was just incredible. And again, the number of people that have opened themselves up to share their feelings, their thoughts, their views of the strength of the district, their views of what the district has as its challenge, and of course what people view that they'd like to see, the characteristics in the next superintendent. Before Frank starts, I do want to say that our profile that we've put together is not an evaluation of any individual or any individuals, and it's not an evaluation of the district. It is a snapshot of the community and their feelings of what they'd like to see in the next superintendent. So by no means does this process, is it about any individual? It's about, again, continuing the process of finding the next superintendent. And with that is, we will develop the ad tonight, we'll be advertising, we will have a profile that becomes the rubric that helps us ascertain, are we on the right track? And it's going to help us and the board evaluate. and get the right individual, because our hope and our belief is this is a great community, it's a great school district. We're going to have a tough time choosing from all the great candidates we get. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank, who's going to work through the quantitative data. He's going to break down all 15 search questions. He'll talk about the open-ended, and then I'm going to come back and talk about the qualitative data, all of the descriptions from all the individual interviews that we had. Frank?
Thank you, Mike. A little bit about what we hope to do today. Without a doubt, we are going to provide the board and everyone in the audience a summary of the survey results. We'll be analyzing those very thoroughly. As Mike said, he will then pick up and give you a similar type of overall picture of the forum notes. We'll provide a working draft of the superintendent profile. That profile, of course, the final benediction of that is always based on the final decision of the Board of Education, which is as it should be. That profile will be used to do a couple of things. It will help us shape the advertisement. The board also has a number of options we gave them in terms of where they might want to advertise, and there's a whole host of things, and we'll be commenting on that, both of us, as we reach that point. And then finally, the whole process of the profile is what we will use when we do the initial screening. Now, that means that we have to take that profile and devise a rubric for it and evaluate each of the candidates that we see relative to that rubric. It's not a whimsical kind of thing that we do. It's a fair and measured assessment where everyone starts at the same basic point, and there's no quality points for favoritism whatsoever. So with that, let's start to look at some data. The survey is comprised of 15 questions that require a rating from most important to neutral to not too important or not at all important. There are also free responses, and I think Mike mentioned what those are. Whether you answered the survey, whether you went and came to a forum, including the big community forum here, it's always the same 3 questions. What are the strengths of the district? What are the areas in need of improvement? And what are the characteristics you would like to see in the superintendent? Respondents indicate their group status, and I'll show you. You know what it is because I'm sure you've already taken the survey. And we're going to work from the aggregate report. The report that basically takes a look at all the individual groups and synthesizes them into one. And we're going to talk in a little while about why we were able to do that. And the short answer is we were able to do that because there was virtually such small variance between each of the individuals that when you take a look at the aggregate, not only do you see that sense of a maximum view, but you see the same essence of what those responses were like. And again, this will become clearer as we move through it. The aggregate report, which is what we're going to be working on today, you see that there were a couple of questions where there was a good measure of variance. In other words, there was a difference of opinion across the board. They were not surprises to us because question 2 had to do with whether the candidate should be a veteran superintendent. And there was a good amount of what we call scatter in those, and a good amount of scatter in question 15, also no surprise to us, as whether the new superintendent should have a doctorate or should be pursuing a doctorate. Those 2 items were very similar to what we see in most districts. As a small aside, I will tell you that every once in a while the district will have a very different opinion as a community about both of those. But that's not the case here, and for whatever it's worth, know that you are consistent with what we're seeing of date. The ones where there were kind of a consistent measure of most important with a question relative to listening to concerns of staff, students, parents, and the community. Highly rated. Highly rated also was the one of the superintendent having a clear vision of what an exemplary education entails. And the third one was to create a positive climate across all segments of the community. They were the ones that scored up in that top range consistently, again, across most groups. So let's start to take a look at the first one. The first one, all people do is choose who you are, all right? You can see on the lower right, that's about the number of people we had across the board. That is just simply a screenshot of the previous one, and you need to get used to that as we move forward, right? That first we're going to look at the numbers, and then we're going to take a screenshot that just gives you a graphic of how those numbers lie out. So this is the first one, the aforementioned one. Being a veteran school district superintendent. The only thing we never do is try to climb into people's heads and say, this is what we think it means, because we don't know what it means other than what the numbers tell us. But having done this in a number of districts, you could see that in terms of being most important, only about 8.4%. What we think, again, no one ever knows, what we think is sophisticated communities are smart enough to know that there are great assistant superintendents out there. There are phenomenal deputy superintendents out there. There are extraordinarily strong central office administrators out there. So to narrow the search and say, no, you only need to be a superintendent, most people aren't willing to do that. The same data, just seen graphically. And again, this is a screenshot, so we apologize for the little bit of blurriness. Question number 3. A real big favorite in terms of people. And when you read the descriptors, of course, listening to the concerns of students, staff, parents, and community. You will see that listening is a huge issue throughout the survey results. Someone who will listen. And sometimes when we talk about a survey and we do some fancy statistics and things like that, the bottom line is the attributes that people are looking for are those same attributes you want in your neighbor, the same attributes you want across your family members, and this is a good example of that. Someone who's going to be, in fact, a good listener. Graphic presentation. Another important one is that sense of clear vision. We mentioned that earlier. Same kind of results, and you see that you don't have too much in the scatter below important. The graphic presentation. Creating a positive climate across all segments of the school community. Another big winner in terms of people looking at the most important option. Climate. Like many of those other descriptors, climate and culture are going to repeat themselves over and over and over again. Increasing academic performance for all students. Every once in a while, this is a question where people can't believe that the majority of folks don't give it a 5. But oftentimes we see that to be the case. Although this one, if you take a look at the combination of importance and very importance, you see what I think most people truly do believe. Later on, we're going to be talking about some summary descriptors and the idea of what does all mean. That little word is extremely important. What does all mean? Possesses strong financial skills. Glad to see that over 81% of people thought that was important, because it truly is. There was a point in time where the superintendent basically put all his or her trust into the business administrator, which is extremely important. I met my former business administrator at a Christmas party, and I was teasing him to his friends, and I said, this is the man who allowed me to sleep at night, because he did. His honesty, his integrity was impeccable. It allowed me to sleep at night. Not well enough that I didn't check everything that was done to be sure that the numbers made sense to me. And I'm a numbers person, but even if you're not, you have to have some sense of financial savvy and the basic implication of, do the numbers make sense relative to the initiatives. The linkages between personnel, recruitment, and retention. Also, when you take a look at most important and important, you start to get some big numbers there. Communication, another phrase that you will hear over and over and over again. The importance of good oral communication, the importance of being a strong writer, the importance of getting out in front of an issue before time compounds it more than it needs to be. We'll touch upon that in a little while, but this is another key indicator in terms of communication, in terms of desired traits. Continuous improvement, at the sake of being pitifully obvious, the concept, no matter how good and how strong the organization is, if you're not improving, you're generally going backwards. It's the basic tenet of Deming's and all the other strategists in this area. And again, a good, solid response. Another linkages question between finances, long-range planning, academic goals, and school budgets. They're all intrinsically linked. And that's why the superintendent has to have a concept of instruction, has to have the concept of personnel management, and all of those things, and of course academic goals and setting those goals and measuring those goals, etc. Again, another solid response. This is an interesting response, and Wall is not significantly different than other school districts in that every once in a while when these results come up, districts feel very kind of awkward about it. Because a quick thumbnail sketch says, wow, about 28% of the people either are neutral about it or don't think it's important. So you're kind of working on a 1 out of 4 response to this question. And, you know, the numbers are what the numbers are, but I respectfully say maybe you need to take a look at the same pipe just from the other end and say 3 out of 4 people think it's important. This is also one that I find very curious and not dissimilar to what we see in other places. You would think in terms of involving stakeholders, no matter every person who responds to this is a stakeholder. But yet you have a certain degree of scatter here, including the 20% of the people who are neutral on this item. Involving the stakeholders in decision-making again, we will revisit again and again as we do further analysis of this data and the free responses of it. Working to establish a positive relationship between members of the board. And that is something that is really a superintendent's responsibility. Make no mistake, the board is the collective boss, so to speak, of the superintendent. But the superintendent needs to work hard to be sure that the group is working in a positive way, that relationships are civil and respectful, and this reflects that exact wish. This is the one, again, that has the greatest degree of scatter, and this is the one that asks, do you need to be either have a doctoral degree or be pursuing it? And I mentioned earlier, this is very different from place to place. The response that you have is very similar to what we see in general. All right? And again, we say only half jokingly, Mike and I are both Fordham PhDs, but we both agree you don't necessarily need a doctoral degree to be a really fantastic superintendent. Okay, so now what we're looking at is, how do you get that sense of the gestalt of what the aggregate looks like versus each of the individual groups? So this is a quick down and dirty way of taking a look at that. So let me just walk you through the matrix. The questions are questions 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can see them on the bottom. Now remember that it starts at question 2 because question 1 asks, who are you, right? And the self-identifier. So question 2 talks about the veteran superintendent, the good listener in 2, in 3, the visionary in 4, and you can read them, I think, thank goodness for a nice big projection here. And then the lower left gives you another little metrics that says MI is most important, I is important, neutral, and then SC says you have kind of a scattered result. I think we could take great solace in knowing that for most of the questions, sans what we said earlier, which is question 2 and question 15, where you have a lot of neutral feelings and some degree of scatter. But with the exception to that, for the most part, across all of the groups, now take a look at that y-axis, the one going vertically. On the top, you see the parents, followed by the teachers, followed by the support staff, followed by the community, and then the administrators. So as we look vertically down for each question, you'll see that there really is a nice alignment. And that's why I said we could look at the aggregate one and get a pretty good assessment of where we are. How did we look at differences? We looked at differences of more than 10 percentage points as being the delta where it starts to become important to recognize the difference between them. So long story made very short, we have pretty good alignment across all of the groups. And when you see the verbal responses, you will see that same kind of alignment again. And not to steal Mike's thunder, but when he talks about the forum question, you'll see that the forum answers align well with the survey-free responses. So it tells you that, thank goodness, we have good alignment between everything. Mike, I think you have some additional last-minute information? Please. Oh, some people didn't respond. In other words, some
Same
people.
number to all the questions?
I don't. Maybe that's on average, but on average, not every question has X number of people that just don't respond to it, and that's at first blush that would be my first answer. The idea that it's the same number, I got to take a look at that. But without a doubt, X number of people don't respond to each question in the same way. Mike has some additional late data that came in from the handwritten survey response.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. So I have information, and it came through both Brian Smythe and Andy Skrupa, who reached out to the senior citizens and did the survey with them and spoke with them. And I think that is an important task, and that is getting out there in the community, opening up two-way communication. That outreach is critical. And, you know, we just can't assume what responses are going to be or what people think. And to that point, the senior citizens was very much aligned with the survey results. However, When it came to number 3, listening to the students, the staff, the community at large, the senior citizens ranked at 96% as most important. I think that really is very telling. On the positive climate, the senior citizens, where in general it was 65% is most important, senior citizens had that at 92%. That a positive climate is critical for the school and for the community at large. And then, surprising to me was, while, as Frank said, it was scattered in terms of recognizing diversity, senior citizens had at 82% as most important. So I think that there's such value in that outreach, and the outreach that I'll be talking about that we did with the community forums and talking with people. And I think that's going to be an important first step of who becomes the next superintendent of schools. That two-way communication and outreach and building trust will be a critical first step.
Thanks, Mike.
What about the super having that experience? The super having the experience, having prior super experience? You didn't
In
answer
terms
that.
of the senior citizens, they had a 36% most, 40% 41% neutral. So it wasn't high for the senior citizens.
So let's take a look at some key phrases. Now keep in mind, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of responses, all right? And what you have to do is you now have to try to take a look at similar phrases, right? And do it in such a way that at the end you have a sense of continuity across groups. So that listing on the left goes down many score similar to that length. So what we try to do is say, what are the best descriptive phrases? What are the ones that come over and over and over again? And these are the ones that do just that. If you take a look at the right side of that data table, you'll see parents, teachers, community, support staff, and administration based on those items on the left. Yes means that they had at least 2, sometimes 3 words that were very similar, or one of the words that are listed on the left. So if we go right to the top, the first line there says compassionate, caring, kind, and empathetic. Okay? So as you go across parent, teacher, community, support, and administration, there will those words or very similar phrases that represented that. So that puts it in kind of a bucket that we want to be sure we represent in the profile. Next line down talks about experienced and competence. Again, you see similar words, maybe not the exact words that a reasonable person could easily link together. The third one down is integrity and ethical. Same situation. Visionary. That very much aligns with the freestanding questions, not the free response questions, but the rated questions, also very important, and important here also. Approachable. And then that band of questions, statements, collaborative, cooperative to all stakeholder groups. Say, well, look, the community people didn't mention that specifically. But keep in mind that the community number was relatively small versus some of the other groups. The next one down says focused and fiscally responsible. I'm sorry, I missed one. Dedicated, enthusiastic, and encouraging. So you see a lot of them are descriptors that are not terribly academic. They have to do with the persona. Let me go back to the one that pardon me. That's what happens when you lean on this thing. I apologize. Mike, I'm into yours now. We're heading in the right direction. Please be patient. Okay. Dedicated, enthusiastic, and encouraging. We have another one that the community fell a little short with, but everyone else saw it to be important. Focused and physically responsible. Again, overarching theme. A good communicator. We mentioned that twice already this evening, and surely enough it comes up here. And here's another set of descriptors. Honest, trustworthy, with no hidden agendas. A good listener, we've heard that before. Responsive, respectful. Next one is also important. Interested in student academic, social, and emotional growth. We heard that repeatedly in both the focus and the survey results. Visible, just exactly what it means. Someone who doesn't visit schools on a perfunctory basis because it's a certain time of the year, but someone who gets in there, visits schools, visit classes, observe teachers, etc. Knows the staff, and an expression that we see and hear a lot, boots on the ground. And it's that descriptive, somebody that's going to do what they need to do, physically be there, and be engaged when they're there. So the next jump to that would be, how do you put all of these things together and put them under a common heading that kind of makes sense? So line of sight is an expression that basically says, at the sake again of being pitifully obvious, that there is a connection in schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. And that it is a progression over time, I apologize, it is a progression over time vertically and horizontally. And the descriptor says to improve and strengthen academic excellence for all students in all disciplines. And I said we were going to stop and revisit all. All means everybody. It means the National Honor Society, the gifted and talented kids, the special ed kids who struggle, the most disabled kids were really keenly interested in life skills in terms of them moving forward in their lives. It means that center of the bell-shaped curve, the kids in the middle that we worry so much about, are they being enriched? Are they being challenged? Do they have the level of rigor that they need to have? It means the LGBTQ kids. It means all kids. And as I've said at a number of the forum sessions, for all of the needs that we're talking about, we're hiring one person who has to be an advocate for everyone. So that's line of sight. It speaks to maintaining and strengthening rigor, and we heard from parents and teachers in particular the need to be sure that our rigor is high enough and our kids are being stretched to their greatest capacity. With embedded professional development to assure success in the next grade, the next course, and ultimately in college and career readiness. And we want the superintendent to have a track record that demonstrates attainment of these attributes. Personal attributes. Now you can imagine, based on everything you just heard, that the persona is going to be very important in this search. Because most of these things really talk about all of the descriptors mentioned earlier. The first sentence was said in a number of different ways, but was clear to us. And that is an experienced, highly skilled leader with a vision of Wall Township schools becoming a benchmark district in the state of New York. And people said that we're overdue to start to shine as a district, especially in comparison to not just neighboring districts, but across the whole state. And I think that phrase kind of captures it. A person who will be honest, ethical, collaborative, respectful, approachable, and compassionate. An accomplished communicator who is responsive, transparent, responds in a timely manner to avoid compounding issues, which we mentioned earlier, and is a good listener, which we mentioned earlier also. So these two are two of those overarching, reoccurring themes. Culture and climate. I think if we need to give the selected superintendent one bit of good advice, really good advice, is those are the two things that need to really be addressed day one and in a big way. The terms are sometimes a little blurred, culture and climate. Culture is usually that big overarching gestalt, and the climate is like what kind of happens on a day-to-day basis. What's the personal interaction like? Those two things will probably make or break, in my opinion, the next superintendent, without a doubt. And we have the data now, I think, that shows it. The superintendent needs to recognize the strength of the district and the areas in need of improvement district-wide, while embracing the need to address the issues of culture and climate that need attention across the entire school community. Next one down, decision-making and consensus builder. An open-minded, collaborative consensus builder who truly values other opinions and points of view. When appropriate, though, he or she will need to make the tough decisions that need to be made on the spot. There are not a whole lot of them, but when they need to be made on the spot, and people need the dignity of a rationale as to why that decision was made. And then lastly is kind of the catch-all. Other characteristics. Like boots on the ground, out-of-the-box thinker. Said in many different ways, but really captures the essence of what people are looking for. An exemplary career as an educator and an administrator. And I will say to the board that sometimes we got to be careful in terms of the ad and what we say about that. And by that I mean, notice that I mentioned educator. There are very fine superintendents, and we both know some of them, who started out as a guidance counselor, started out as a school psychologist, started out in a position other than a teacher, but has a track record in step 2, maybe as a principal, to show that they really did know their stuff in terms of how to run a school, and show great promise maybe as an assistant superintendent. So you want an exemplary career as both an educator and an administrator. Somebody who is financially astute and physically savvy, sees the big picture, sees the landmines that are coming up there, and does something about it. Visible and community-minded, able to recruit, to hire, to nurture, and to retain personnel. Hold himself, herself, and all others responsible for their actions. Heard loud and clear. Mindful of the community without children. And I tell my doctoral students all the time, get a number of or a percentage of people without kids in school, and you generally will be very surprised. It's a lot higher than people think. They pay the same taxes as everyone else, and the school, we know, innately affects them by home values. We all know that. But there's got to be some other hook to the school that says to those people, hey, thank you. On the other hand, I would say people my age, whose kids are way out of school, and kids have kids of their own, who probably don't even live in districts oftentimes, there's a perception that, oh, if they had to vote, they'd all vote no. And I would say respectfully, you got to gather some data and get a sense of what percentage of the public don't have kids in school. Because if they all voted no, you'd be in real big trouble. So many more than you think are voting yes, for two reasons. Number one, they realize their home values are linked to it. And number two, I think, and more importantly, and I'm no Pollyanna, but I believe this, they do it because they think it's the right thing to do. And lastly, and this is without being melodramatic, someone who truly love the Wall community. And I was blessed that way, and I can speak for Mike to say he was also. It's a really great feeling to love the place you're in. Makes it awful hard to leave. All righty? Mike, I'll turn it over to you now, sir.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. How do I take all of these notes and make sense out of it? Thousands and thousands of comments. And this is a slide. It comes from Strauss and Corbin, The Basics of Qualitative Research. And more or less, as I explained to students in qualitative research, when they feel intimidated at the prospect of it, I say just think of a large crossword puzzle and think of all the pieces, and then how do you how do you make sense of it? They say, oh, you put it in buckets by colors and so on, and then it starts to make sense, and you start putting it together. That's pretty much what my process is. It's a qualitative process. It starts with big overarching themes that were recurring. And there were 16 of them that were recurring throughout. And that was being, and again, to Frank's point, this was a unique profile development. Most developments of profile were focusing on experience, technical skills, knowledge. I would say the majority of the profile development was talking about humanistic characteristics, on the person, on character, on integrity. So it was different, but it was real. This is what the community has spoken. So trustworthy, respectful, a relationship builder among students, staff, administrators, parents, board members, community. Strategic and deliberate in planning and programming. Transparent in all actions. Exceptional communication skills. Financial acumen. Commitment to continuous improvement. Understands inclusive equity and diversity. Is equitable and fair in all dealings. Is honest. Strong leadership and vision that will inspire and motivate. Some of these words sound familiar because they're all coming from you as a community. Dawn Choma, when I was setting up, she was seeing my slides and she's like, I know those words. These words are not my words. These are the words of the community. Where'd I leave off? Track record of success. A collaborator who seeks and values input and feedback. Someone who's visible and present. Someone who's a student-centered educator. Those were recurring themes. That's where we then tried to put them into buckets, color buckets, and try to see any threads and any recurring themes and finding relationships within this. And so in analyzing and looking at it, and looking at the 16 characteristics, I was able to put trustworthy, respectful, equitable and fair, honest, into the bucket that I labeled high personal, moral, character, and integrity. So that's the first bucket that I developed from all the comments. The second, exceptional communication skills, understanding inclusive equity and diversity, strong leadership and vision that will inspire and motivate, track record of success, a collaborator who seeks and values input and feedback. I labeled bucket number 2, the strategic leader. The third bucket, transparent in all actions, financial acumen, commitment to continuous improvement. I just utilize the financial acumen. That someone really is going to have to be very savvy in facilities, in financing, in funding, and not just here locally, but on the county and state level. And the third, relationship builder among students, staff, administrators, parents, board members, and community, being strategic and deliberate in planning and programming, being visible and present, being a student-centered educator. That was the fourth bucket, which I called educational philosophy. So I synthesized it down, I analyzed all the comments, and then you have to look for reliability and validity. So I took my buckets and I compared it to Frank's analysis. And there are his K-12 line of sight, culture and climate, personal attributes, decision maker, and his other characteristics, financially astute, fiscally savvy, etc. And my 4 buckets: strategic leader, high personal moral character and integrity, educational philosophy, and financial acumen. I saw that there was a great alignment there. But of course, that isn't enough, so I took it to the Federal Interstate School Leadership Licensure, the ISLIC standards. And if you read the ISLIC standards, you could see that there is good alignment between both Frank's summary of his open forum notes and my forum notes as well. There are a couple of outliers worth mentioning. An outlier being that there were strong people for and there were strong people against. You had a number of people worthy of mentioning that says the next superintendent should be someone who's been in Wall, who knows Wall, who is a Wall administrator. Then you'd have another group equally as loud and vocal saying, we need new blood, we need somebody from the outside. And so I need to let you know that there is an outlier that is what I call bipolar. 2 strong opinions that are very different. And then there's another outlier that it was said once, but it really said a lot. And it was, if the new superintendent says new and exciting, they should be fired. And that's because there's been a recurring theme throughout the district, and it's called institutional fatigue. And institutional fatigue happens when there's a lot of change in leadership, because a new leader comes in and she and he will set their initiatives. Then that leader leaves, a new leader comes in, and there's another set of initiatives down. And I was in a forum with one of the faculties, and one gentleman who was here 20 years had something like 14 assistant superintendents and 8 superintendents in not a long amount of time. When there's just great change, it causes a lot of stress and fatigue on the institution. And so hopefully your next superintendent will be very astute to that. And there was a comment, many comments, but one that just is ringing in my ear: if it's not broke, don't fix it, leave it alone. And that's true in many ways. You know, how do we stick to a continuous improvement model? How do we be efficient? Again, these are not my words. None of this is my words. I am reflecting back on what we've heard from the community. So I'm talking about the first bucket, trustworthy, and I'm smiling thinking about the high school students that I met and spent time with, and through the graciousness and hospitality of Rose Sergio, I was going to get it, that's my mother's maiden name, Rose Sergio. She had pizza for the kids, and we had a great time. But going back to the point of thanking Brian and Andy for reaching out and talking to the seniors and getting the feedback, the kids, after meeting with them for roughly an hour, they just said to me, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. I'm like, are you kidding me? This has been my honor and privilege. You've energized me. I'm ready to take down the wall now. But the kids, if you want to hear what the truth, talk to the kids. They'll tell you. And this is what the kids said to me. Please, sir, find us someone who truly wants to be here in Wall, who will smile and say hello to us. someone who loves education, loves kids, loves people, knows what they're doing, willing to give snow days. They didn't like snow days, not getting them, and they certainly didn't like not having February break. And I got an earful about the parking situation as well. They're not happy with that. But they want someone who radiates happiness out of the mouths of babes. Who wouldn't want that? Who would not want that? And that was your high school students. And again, your words, someone to build trust within and among all constituents groups, be able to work with the labor groups. I had to go and thank your union president. Absolutely couldn't be more helpful to work with us and partner to get the right person for the kids, for the faculty, for the community. Thank you very much. Treats everyone with dignity and respect, is humanistic, is ethical, genuinely appreciative of educators and what educators do, is professional, compassionate, and celebrates that compassion in others, and celebrates what's good and puts people in the right direction. Again, the words of the Wall Township community. Strategic leader, of course, communication skills, equity and diversity, strong leadership, track record of success, and supports the needs of all students. Frank hit that and dealt with that pretty extensively. A superintendent that advocates for everyone, can deal with the facility and financial issues, as well as support the social and emotional awareness initiatives, the mental health concerns in our society. A leader with strong vision, able to sell and get buy-in, actively seeks and values stakeholders' input, empowers administrators with a management style that includes two-way communications, able to work with political and government agencies to promote growth of the district as well as the community at large. Financial acumen, able to address underperforming staff members, have a keen financial, technological skills and understanding, uses data and research to help drive initiatives and growth, takes control of the budget, facilities improvement, manage resources efficiently. The relationship, educational philosophy, being able to anticipate the issues, not being behind it, but being ahead of things. Being able to create team building, utilize the team and utilize your resources. Collaborative decision making on all levels. Educational leader and proven track record of being a master teacher, of knowing what good teaching and good learning is all about. Is willing and knows the value of professional development of your faculty and staff. Getting out in front of issues, good people skills, pro-special education, a general trust and comfort level with all abilities, someone who will communicate the rationale behind decisions, again, supporting something Frank's talking about. And I thought this was, it came up many times. Someone who's not afraid to deliver the bad news, to say the honest bad news, straightforward, direct, up front, to admit mistakes, to be the sole final decision when needed, have the courage to get in the middle, bring unity, unite the schools, and in doing so, you'll bring great pride back to the entire district, someone who can inspire, put kids first, outcome driven. And that was, again, another theme, that to unite all the schools, to really work hard at the transitions from elementary school, where everyone goes into the big intermediate, from intermediate to high school, and never forget, how are our kids doing after they graduate? This isn't the nurse's credo. This is our shift. It's their life. Did we prepare them for success beyond Wall High School? Strengths of the district, and the parents, the community, the staff, the caring staff, all of that was high on the list of strengths. The number of people who work here in Wall and live here in Wall is extremely high. The faculty and staff are committed to the students, and the students feel it. There's great stability in the community. Sports, arts, music are strong, and there's a great school spirit to go along with the many opportunities for kids to get involved. Student achievement is high. The school district has a good reputation. People who grow up here usually stay and raise their families here, and if they don't, they usually come back, is what they tell me. Strong teacher-student-parent bond, and I like this and I feel it myself. There's a small town feel to Wall. It might be large in terms of geographic. I've mentioned I have a home in Seagirt and we border Wall, and it seems like it is a very big geographic, but there's a feel. People know each other, people care about each other. There's a lot going on in the community for all people. The weaknesses is the inconsistency in the central office leadership in terms of, again, changes. And this has to be right. We can't afford not to make this right. We have to work hard to make it right. This is an important decision. We have to get it right, and it's crucial that we do. Emotions are high right now. And this, I think, will be the unifying force that people are looking for. People will be behind. People will rally around. And there's a widespread feeling of the lack of trust and transparency, a concern over the need to address the facility and financial needs of the district. Again, until we can rebuild trust, it's going to be very difficult to address the financial and facility issues that we're facing, and that will be a big challenge for the next superintendent. Many stakeholders feel their input and comments are not welcomed by the governing structure of the district. So those are the challenges that the next superintendent, she or he, will be facing. So we've drafted an advertisement. I believe, Brian, you handed it out to the board, or you have it to hand out. Frank, the advertisement, copies, or we're going to work off the. We're going to work off here. All right, we're going to work off here. So our next step is tonight we'll draft an advertisement. Your district will publish it. We gave you options. We can talk about options of where we can publish. And then we go on the active recruitment for somebody that meets the profile that we've put together. So we have the draft of the advertisement. And this is the large advertisement that includes the profile. So if the board, we can take a look at the 4 areas. Frank, why don't you read off the... Those, yeah.
Right here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good, thank you, I'm sorry. As you can see, the draft of the advertisement is very closely linked to the profile, and should be. And at the sake of repeating myself, I said that when we screen people and evaluate those, we'll use the very same, and we respectfully ask the board to do the same in terms of whatever rubric they choose. So all of these are basically linked to what Mike mentioned a minute ago. What you do have in your packet also is a listing of possible sites in terms of where you would like to advertise. And these 2 things are obviously linked. I mentioned this about the ads because They vary in price. You'll notice that the New York Times is not there, and there's a reason for that. Most districts are shying away because of the extraordinary cost. We did a search on the Gold Coast of Long Island, where I think the ad cost somewhere in excess of $30,000. And of course, they give you a great bargain. If you do it twice, they cut it in half, but you start to do the numbers. It's pretty telling. They did that twice, not just a repeat, but they did that twice. So the figures can be absolutely astronomical. I do a lot of individual recruitment work and personnel work in the Bergenfield School District in Bergen County. And I could tell you that we have found that for the most part, many of the online options reap much better candidates than some of the much more expensive ones. Now, I raise that as an interlude to this because this is a draft of an advertisement that would probably be way too expensive to ever post, all right? So the conventional wisdom at this point is, especially if you go with many of these, is to do a large one, right, that usually resides on the website, and something that will serve as a link, even if it isn't really an electronic link, if it's a print version, of course, but a link that will get you from the ad to this. All righty? So why don't we get back to this? Mike, would you like me to review this one as it sits?
I would think so, because at the end of the day, we need to get moving on the advertisement. We want to get it out there. We want to make sure that the profile is really, that the board feels it is representative of the community and its views, and that we can all start getting to work. We could get to work in terms of the recruitment of candidates, and very shortly, the board will get to the work of interviewing the candidates, and we'll get the process moving. And ideally, we would love to have somebody be in place on or about July 1st, 2020.
Right. So if we start out to the top, we generally always give a descriptor because I suspect that you will get people from beyond the tri-state area, without a doubt. And when you start to get to Jersey, tri-state might have a different opinion than it might up in northern New Jersey, Rockland, Westchester, and Nassau. We're in the final stages of a search, really right at the final stages, about to present a slate to the Board of Education. And just to give you a sampling, I think we had 16 superintendents, Mike? 16 superintendents, about 8 to 10 assistant superintendents, some very highly qualified other people, and a total of about 44 resumes. This is in a very small district, a fraction of the size of Wall. But the point to be made is they came from 11 different states. So you got to give people some sense of an overview of where you are, and that's what that first piece does. Did some quick calculations. At 26,000 residents, you probably have about 17,000 adults. And that speaks to some of those survey numbers being what they are.
I just want to comment on Frank's point about our search in New York State. We're up in Dutchess County, and we have 11 out-of-state candidates and 15 plus superintendents. That's not really near the New York metropolitan area, let alone in southern Monmouth County. I think we're really going to be in a great position, and that's why we talk about the strengths of the district. That's why we get to know your district, because this is not a hard sell. This is a great place to be, and the characteristics, for the right individual, this will fly, and you can really make a significant contribution to education. So we're excited, and we really are very optimistic of the pool that this search will get.
Yeah, so let me then continue. That center band speaks a lot to what we were talking about in general, and we want to make it very clear to the candidate what that expectation is. So if we look at what specific traits possesses a sophisticated understanding of teaching and learning and promotes the importance of continuous improvement. And under there are many of the descriptors that we have already shared with you. Mike, if you can roll up just a bit, please.
Absolutely.
Foster a positive and professional climate of mutual trust and respect among faculty, staff, students, administrators, board members, and the community at large. First word after that, listens, right? I mean, it's a repetitive thing, and all those descriptors, trust, respect, they're all in there. So you make very clear to your candidate just what we expect from them. We grill them very tough. We ask the tough questions. We ask for a lot of examples and evidence. We will send to you a bank, not because you are obliged to use it, but a bank of questions which we think are very telling, including some very difficult scenarios, because our firm belief is if you can't handle the interview, you can't do the job. It's just that simple. And those scenarios can be used to look at somebody and look for a quick response on their feet. It could be a real tough scenario that you might give them an hour to do a written response by hand. That will serve as a very good measure in terms of their writing skills. An important point that we also mentioned in terms of communication. So all of these pieces, one to all link. Be a leader who is inspirational, motivational, caring, and builds on the successes of the district. And again, all of those other descriptors come from those summary items described by both Mike and I. I think there's one more, Mike? Yeah. Demonstrates leadership and physical experience. We talked about the need for that. Passionate about children. Now, somebody who's really going to love this job here, and I'll say for the second time, when you really love your job, it's hard to leave. And that's what I think we have heard over and over and over again. We want somebody who's going to be here for a while. The descriptor also helps the person who has to think about relocating their family. And sometimes it's a really good job, but to be blunt, people are not particularly enamored. They're enamored with the job and the challenge that the job represents, but not so enamored that they want to move their family into the district or even near the district. And we say that a good way to word it is, will live close or in. Because living in represents another whole challenge, especially in these days of social media. I mean, it could really be tough. And it could be tough to be a teacher and have your kids in school. It could be even tougher to be a principal and have your kids in school. And it can be real tough to be a superintendent and have your kids in school. But for the people who have to move, they want to be sure that this is going to be the place for them and for their family, and in particularly for their kids. I think, as Mike said, this district fits that bill beautifully. Because if I were going to move, my kids are 37 and 34. But if I was going to move, when they were young, this would be the great place to go. For all the reasons you already know better than I do. It's a great place to raise kids. The physical location is perfect. The proximity to the water is phenomenal. All the things you would want. The next thing, you see the address. I believe, Mike, we're going to have a singular email address just for this search. Am I correct?
It's up there.
It's up there. I thank you. I stand corrected. It's up there. So
And
that
we'll
that
have
will.
the link to the profile on the website. We're going to keep everything current. I think the board has done a great job in terms of communicating the whole process, and we want to keep that up right through to the end. when we advertise our meet and greet for the next superintendent to the community. So we'll be keeping the board, and the board will keep the community apprised of the process.
And before we get to the last three items, I will respectfully repeat myself when I say that the board needs to come to some consensus, and certainly doesn't need to do it tonight, but needs to come to some consensus about any other variables that are going to go in there, like experience and at what level. All right, and you got to be always careful not to box yourself in a corner with that one, because once that goes in print, it has to be for everyone. It can't be, well, maybe we'll make an exception, because then, you know, the wheels come off the cart very, very quickly with that one. So again, respectfully, think long and hard about that one. Salary, regionally competitive is the smartest thing to say. All right? Because regionally competitive might look okay for a lot of people and may look great for others. So that if you're coming from a distance, if you're coming from a really high-performing school district, let's say outside of Rochester area, those salaries are high. Not as high as Rockland, Westchester, and Nassau, but high. But if you move just slightly between Rochester and, let's say, Albany, to use New York as an example, this salary may look extremely attractive to someone. There may be a little adjustment in terms of housing costs. These housing costs are going to be higher, but all things to be considered. So regional is clearly the way to go. The anticipated date is always relative to who the candidate is. You're going to have candidates that have separation agreements of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. And you can't make a decision based on that. You just can't. However, you certainly have to think about that. In the event of, and this is not, again, harbingers of things to come, but Mike and I can always help you in terms of, you know, a list of people that would make an excellent short-term interim. It is one thing to start July 1st. It's another thing to start August 1st. It's even another thing to start September 1st. It's very different on October 1st. All of those things represent individual challenges. The timeline, it's a preferred date, not a set-in-stone date, because you never know when the extraordinary candidate comes along. We were having dinner, Mike and I, today. We got an email about the district that we mentioned just a minute ago, and there were, I think, 3 or 4 late resumes that came in, I think, today. We're going to be going Thursday to present the slate, but you never really close that door, because you never really know who that fine candidate is going to be. So that's a sense of the ad, how it links to the profile, and moving forward from there.
And to that, I'm sorry, Russ, go ahead.
To your point about the word preferred, wouldn't you consider using that for the start date as well?
Yeah, well, usually what we do with the start date, we usually put a little caveat at the end that says, dependent upon the availability of the candidate. And that's important in terms of the public. You know, you don't want anything in cement that you can't deliver on. Touche, a good point, and thank you. Mike, do we have a slide after that?
No, I just want to make sure, are there any other comments from the board at this point? Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yes, please. Okay. No, we're okay.
Give me that number that you shared with me a minute ago.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's this. Thank you.
Okay, Good. Gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. At this point in time, we'll open up questions from the board.
Yes, excellent presentation. I just would like, if you could, just for the public's information, there was some comments to some of the board members out in public asking us about the whole process of how we collected the data, and that could we rely on the data being the fact that there wasn't any limit to the number of times somebody could reply, and at how during our interview with you guys, or our first meeting, I should say, you were recommended that in previous searches you found that collecting, the only way you could do that would be is if you collected the IP addresses of people to stop them from doing it multiple times, and that we didn't, as a board, felt that that was a road we didn't want to go down, and you agreed that that would be something that was probably not a good idea, and that would lead, of course, to people going on and maybe perhaps multiplying their responses, and if they did, how significant would that be to the final results? And in your experience, is that something that the board should take from this? Or, again, we felt that it was more important to the anonymity of the survey was paramount, and that's why we did not lock it up in only one per IP, which was also based on, like I said, your recommendations to us. So I just wanted to make sure if you could speak a little bit to that, please.
Sure. And I could appreciate the critical lens of everything being viewed, and I could appreciate and respect it. When I talked about my piece of qualitative and how do you make sense of it, I talked about creating themes and consistency. And so while the survey online is not a perfect process, there's great consistency with the interviews that we've held throughout the community with the survey. So if there was individuals that were trying to skew the survey results, it really didn't ferret out that way, and I believe strongly. Also understand that this is a piece of the process, and that this is, by and large, we're not picking a superintendent, we're developing a criteria to search and recruit a superintendent. So I think also things have to be put in perspective. I think that we listened to everybody that wanted to share their thoughts, opinions, comments, and I think that we have a really good overarching profile of what the community is looking for, and based on your input of speaking to people, now is the feedback for us of, did we capture what you believe you're looking for in the next superintendent of schools?
And I'd add, if I may, that you have two very different data pools. You have the survey, and surveys are always subject to something in terms of being askew. And then you have the forums. The forums, we simply wrote what people said. And I think when you compare, and Mike and I always work independent of each other. It's just like a little thing that we have. We work independent, and then we put the two things together. When you see how closely those items mesh, it gives you a sense that the two of them were pretty well aligned. So I think from a data collection vantage point, we're in pretty good grounds. Neither of us are Pollyanna. I mean, if you have a certain number of people who were going to game the system, but you had, out of, I think I said before, you had 17,000 adults, and we ran about 1,700 responses, about 1 out of 10. Not bad, right? Yeah, but 2,600 we had to adjust for children, right? So I said we probably looked at about 1,700, rough figures. It's a pretty good response. And with regard to hearing repeatedly people talking about a lack of trust, we've been doing this a long time. And I could tell you that when we talk to people and we're asking them questions as straightforward as strengths, weaknesses, and characteristics you'd like to see in your next superintendent, and people describe experiences with tears in their eyes, that's not something you often see. You don't see people with tears in their eyes. You may get an individual conversation where someone had one particular, but you don't get that. When we sat down with groups of people, and people said to us, "Do you have a tape recorder on you recording us?" I thought they were kidding. They were serious. So if there's any sense of how real the lack of trust issue is, that's really the case. People who ask to speak to us at a remote site. That doesn't happen every day. So with those things in play, I think it's reasonable to say, let's see what happens. I think that the proof of the pudding, and I'll go full cycle by saying the proof of the pudding is two very different analysis from two different pools of data pointing exactly the same characteristics. I think whatever happened, we wound up in a really good place. And rather than labor that too long, I think we got to get to our next step, get the profile finalized, let's get the ads out, and let us do what we need to do in terms of starting to screen people. And I say that with great respect to everyone. Other questions from the board?
So you mentioned the ad being too long to post in a newspaper, which I agree. In the independent school or private school world, generally when there's a head of school kind of posting, it's a search firm like yourselves and an inquiry to them and then an opportunity statement, which is 6, 8, 10, 12 pages long. Is that what you envision for this?
No, I don't.
Or not the same way?
No. Mike, you want to take a first crack at that, please?
What I envision is we will decide the media of which we'll be advertising in. Many of them that we gave you will also be free. We also have an ad that we've drafted, much user-friendly, that will lead people to the website to go into the profile and see the full profile. So the answer to that is we have a short version ad that we recommend to the board, and then we put the profile. I'm going to just revert back to Joe's point and say, if the board feels or feels that there may be credibility issues with the profile development, there's nothing that would hold you back from putting the draft to the profile and soliciting input into the profile from people. That could be a suggestion if that was of issue. But again, I think, and I don't think, I know that we have a really good profile based on our conversations and survey. We're eager and ready to get the recruitment started. I have told the board at times that I have been inundated with inquiries about the Wall superintendent search, and I just say, hang on, it's coming February 10th. It'll be open on the 11th because there's a lot of interest. We didn't speak about this, but while you have your own unique challenges and even fiscal and facility, there are so many Monmouth County and Ocean County districts that have been really devastated by the new funding formula and are in real trouble, that this is almost a really strong, attractive district based also on the current phenomena in the state funding formula. So I think we're in a great position as a board, and I say we are your team, and that time-wise, we need to keep moving and stay ahead of the curve at this point.
I have a question. Will you be utilizing the profile as a rubric during the application process? And if so, will we see the results of that?
Yeah, the profile does become a rubric, but it's a rubric for us screening. But know that Frank is I think you're the eternal optimist. He keeps saying, oh, we have 44, we got 3 more. No, Frank, we have 50 applicants, and I got 7 more today. We have a lot, but we use that and we screen, and we'll rate people based on the characteristics. But you as a Board of Ed will get every application and every applicant, and we will tell you what we know. And we may put them in order of these people meet and exceed the characteristics. These people are very close, but you may want to look at them because of this. But that's a board decision. Frank and Mike are your consultants. We're your advisors. We're your counselors. We're your support. We're helping you in your job. But it's your job, and we're going to work with you. So that profile is not what we use. We use that to self-assess, are we getting the right people? You'll be using that to assess, are we picking the right people? We will be using that profile collectively together on March 12th, I believe, when we bring you all the candidates, and then we as a board develop the questions, because those questions should be in alignment with the characteristics we're looking for. So I am very confident we have a tight process in place, and we're going to do well with you. We're going to stay to this process. What we have to start building, and to Joe's point, and I respect it, we need to build community trust in the process. We have to build transparency. We have to let people know we are sincerely committed to get the right person to lead the Wall schools. It is an imperative.
And that's why it's important that all of these things go up, so that people who couldn't make it tonight, maybe weren't able to get the recorded version, have an opportunity to see where things are.
Chair, could you talk a little bit about, so that's screening, and then you alleged into interview stage 1. So can you talk a little bit about how stage 2 might look, and where there'll be 2 or 3 that are selected from that first phase of interviews, and how might the community be involved at that level, or what have you seen?
We've mentioned it in the board planning meeting, and it'll be a board decision. So if the question is how can we involve the community, then my answer to that, if that's the question.
Well, when I say community, I mean administrators, teachers, I'm not speaking just the neighbors. I'm talking about the school community.
So we talked as a board about a confidential process, and that if we want to get the best candidates for the job, that anonymity is a must, and that every candidate will know that confidentiality ends when they're a finalist for the position. Nobody wants to go for a job that they are not going to get and have their current employer know. So if we want to keep the best people in the pool, we will have confidential. But now that we come to the end and we're down to, let's say, 2 candidates, then you can do many things, and we will discuss that with the board at the next planning. But things could be visiting candidates in their district, having candidates here in the district, and having meet and greets. We tend not to like have a presentation and people, that doesn't work as well. But we like, again, as we talked throughout the process, we like an authentic process where it's an authentic context and as non-artificial as possible. So those are areas of where, at the end, you can bring in community as you define it or need to define it.
Any other questions for the board? I would just like to thank you for compiling everything through. I'd like to thank everybody who filled out the surveys. I will apologize again for inundating emails and text messages and phone calls. Again, we felt it was very important that we get as many surveys as we could in there. And speaking to what Joe was saying, the anonymity we felt as a board was extremely important in this process. And if you were going to limit it to IP addresses, and you might only have one IP address in a household, you might have, you know, two parents and a kid, or, you know, if you were going to have the IP address from the school, then you're going to have one person from the IP address at the school, where, you know, you could have hundreds of people that would you know, want to be filling it out there. So I know there was some concern in that in terms of the overall responses. If you could speak to that in relation to other districts that you've worked with, did you feel it was a good response in terms of numbers?
I'll go first and say, in my experience, that was the most I've ever received in any district, by far, not even close. Frank?
But I would add that this district is bigger than a lot of them that we've seen. And I must say that in terms of the degree to which the district advertised was like nothing I had ever seen. So when you click on to the Wall website, you see this thing splash right in front of your eyes that says words to the effect, I've never seen that before. It's oftentimes buried somewhere deeper into the, I've never seen things advertised like this before. So you have two things working in tandem. You have a district that is 26,000 people. That's a fair-sized district when you consider a suburban district in the tri-state area. It truly is. And the way you advertised it was, in my opinion, unprecedented.
One of the other things that I wanted to comment, and this spoke in the presentation, was how the thought process from the different groups were aligned, and the themes and the characteristics and the attributes of, you know, what was highlighted in the community in terms of the characteristics of the new superintendent. I thought, for me, they were right on with, you know, sort of, you know, what we were expecting, or what, you know, at least I felt what the district needs were, you know, going forward. So I'd like to thank you for that. And one last question. So this presentation, you guys will send over to us. And
Ryan has it,
Yep.
and Dawn Choma has it.
Okay.
Done already.
Yeah, it's already in there. Okay, he's got his computer on it. Mine's closed. So this will, you know, again, go up on the website. And as we have been, you know, talking, and as things have come in here, we have been putting those things up on the website. Again, you go to BOE, you can go down the superintendent search, or on the right-hand side of the page, if you scroll down, there's an area where there's a specific link to that. Just to let everybody know, in you know, in the community, and it goes to the website, there is not only that composite which you guys highlighted tonight, but also those individual surveys are all posted there as well. And with that, I will open up for public comment.
Betsy Cross, I live in Wall. All right, thank you for that presentation. I just have a couple comments, and I'm hoping you can narrow it down a little bit more, because the way it's written right now, you could be a janitor applying, or a teacher. I mean, anybody could apply. Thank you. And I think we need to either say, a principal before, a seasoned superintendent. This to me is just a little bit way too vague. If you could go over, how many seniors did you meet with? I thought it was good that you did, but I didn't see anything before. And I wasn't sure how you picked the students. My son wasn't picked to be in on it, and I think he would have been interested because he's had a couple issues. So if you could go over that. We have a big learning curve here with the board, and we have 6 new members. Have you thought of maybe suggesting that they have a superintendent retired from another town, maybe sit in with them? Because a lot of people don't have the comfort level that they need, that these 8 people are going to pick the best person. And I'm glad that you're going to give them questions, because that's great. But I don't want the questions given out too far in advance, because sometimes what we find is people apply for things and they have the questions before they should. So there's a lot of fear here in this town, and I would much rather have somebody else. Are you going to be sitting in on the interviews too, the 2 of you, or is it just the 8 of them?
No, we won't be sitting in.
Well, we may.
It's a board decision, correct.
All right, my preference would be that you sit in with them, because we have 6 brand-new people here. It is way too much of a job for them to do. I just don't have the comfort level. And maybe, I think we have a couple retired superintendents that are in town. Maybe they could sit in on it. I just think to have, maybe not be voting on it, but say, look, these are the top things you want to be looking for. These are the top questions. Because we just have not had a good experience in the past. Mr. Habel was the high school principal, then he became the superintendent, and we have to just not have this golden parachute contract here. I mean, after Habel, the next contract was even better than his. We got to start from the beginning and just not take the current contract and make it even better, because that's all that happens.
If I can maybe answer your first question,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I don't want to cut you short.
Go ahead.
May I? With regard to that last aspect that I mentioned.
What are you saying?
I'm sorry?
I don't know, he was talking. Go ahead, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
I'm sorry if I interrupted.
No, that's okay, go ahead.
With regard to the general ad, my caution to the board was to think about what you want in terms of qualifications and years of experience. So, for example, and this is not something that would come engraved in 2 tablets from a mountain, but if you want, let's say, 5 years of exemplary teaching experience, 7 years, you take a look at that. The more critical one is, what are you looking for in terms of administrative experience? You have a pretty good indication that there's not a lot of interest in limiting it to just superintendents. That's great. But then you're going to need to take a look at, what does that mean? What's that top level, actually the lowest level that you would be interested in terms of administrative experience? Because as I said, once you put that in writing, you can't go back. All right? So that's just something in reference to your question that has to be determined.
Right, and I don't think we want to rush and get this out tomorrow. I think, take a couple more days and narrow that down and go back and forth, because that's so important. What we don't want to have happen is we have a great seasoned superintendent, and they say, I'm not even going to bother applying because they've already made their decision. So I want the best person, whether it's an internal person or an external person that was a superintendent before, the best person. And the only way we're going to get that is to not just shove this out tomorrow and have something super generic and people just say, I'm not even going to bother. A couple other things. You kind of did group together. Like when I went through it quickly before I came here, you grouped together. I grouped together most important, and then not important, and not at all important. And I got rid of the neutrals. Like, to me, it was just too much. You know, the neutrals to me, so you group them together for everything else but the superintendent. I was surprised the administrators really did want somebody more of a seasoned superintendent. The other thing I was surprised with, 42 people answered, but we only have 26.5 administrators. So that's where I would discount 500 of those numbers in there because people took it 2-3 times. So I thought the number was low considering how many times it went out. But that administrator one surprised me. Lack of trust and transparency, it's the biggest issue in the district. And it's an issue with the board and the public. So that's why we're having this issue where people are not having the full faith in the board and picking the right person for the district going forward. When you went to the seniors, Andy, did you go to like 4 seasons, Alair Estates? Go over which ones you went to and how many seniors you went to. I was kind of surprised at that 32% number. Where are all the comments? Some of my comments didn't really show up there. So where are the comments? Are you going to give out hard copies to everybody? Are you going to post them online? I mean, people took the time to do those comments. I'm just kind of surprised how they were kind of grouped together like that. And that first slide that you did, were they in order of exactly?
No.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, they should have been more in order of what you heard over and over again. To me.
They were listed in terms of being the most predominant responses. There was no real hierarchical because no questions, no words were exact across each one of them. You're kind of grouping them up in buckets.
Okay. The draft job profile, I think you should post, and we've done that in the past. I think it should be posted for the public to see so that we all agree that that is what we want, not kind of, this is kind of what we're looking for and, you know, gear it that way. So, and then Russ's point, yeah, that needs to say, if the last person can interview is March 25th, 4 months from now is July 25th. So we're going to throw people out that aren't going to apply and say, oh, I can't get out of my job by July 1st. So please make that much clearer. It can be July, August, or September. We're not shutting you out because you got a 120-day notice. I didn't get that part when you said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I can't imagine who was putting that down. We have so many things broken here. That, to me, would not be one that somebody that was a common theme that stuck out in your head. We have too many things broken here. But I really think that the two of you should be sitting in with the interviews. I think just for transparency and accountability to say, you know, you were sitting in the room and not give your input on who you'd vote for, but I'd like other people in the room. One big issue for me is my son's in the high school now, and the numbers for the high school were below average for English and math. The numbers are terrible. So we need somebody with a proven history that's going to get the high school going. Intermediate is great. But when I got to the high school, I'm a little disappointed. And so is my son.
Thank you, Ms. Cross. It's about 10 minutes, 9.5 minutes
I know, and you
or
have
so.
nobody here because,
Well, if you can limit the
Yeah.
questions specifically to the superintendent search survey.
that's what I'm doing.
Last comment was not in reference to the survey.
And what I'm disappointed in too is how come just Brian and Dawn have all this information? That's all this information the board should have had when they got here. That's what, I didn't understand that. Like, why do they have it and why didn't they have it? And why didn't we have it? Like, this should have been up earlier so people could have went through it. You might have had more people here. That's just, you know, one of the themes that happen over and over again. And I think they should come in with some type of a business plan on what they're going to do to help the shortfalls in the district. Like, that should be in their application. All the people took the time out to write the shortfalls. Ask the people to say what they're going to do. And I would prefer to see only a 3-year contract, not a 5-year contract. Just start with 3. You do a great job. You know, put in merit bonuses. But to get into this another 5-year, we can't get out of it. Forget it. I mean, it's been a bad 15 years.
Thank you, Ms. Cross.
Thank you for your presentation.
For clarification, the business office received tonight's PowerPoint tonight. And when we did, it was emailed all to the Board of Education so that if we want to further review it, you can.
Board received the surveys on Friday. We were able to go over the surveys over the weekend. The comments are not going to be published. It's just there's names and different things like that are in there, so we will not be publishing the comments. In terms of the board needing Frank and Mike in on the process, that is something that the board will discuss. That is something that is in our purview to decide that as a board. And in terms of the request for specific amounts of time period for the contract, that is something else that the board will discuss. And also in terms of experience that goes into the ad, that is something that the board will discuss as well. This presentation was given to us, and I think it was a fantastic presentation, and it allows us and equips us with the tools that helps us make the decision to get the best superintendent that we can get for this district. I think, and as Frank and Mike have echoed, that it is going to be and has been and always will be an excellent job. The community is fantastic. Our teachers are fantastic. We have a lot of things going in this district. And the board is committed to this process. We are going to see every step of this process and to completion. And once we've finished with one step, we go to the next step. And we are not going to, leave any stone unturned. We are going to make sure that we review all of the applications, all of the resumes, everything that we do on this board is going to be in a cohesive manner. It is going to be with the best for this district in mind. 110%.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. And I just, no response to anything in particular, but because it is an ever-evolving process, just like on any issue, although this is probably one of the most important issues, you have a right, teachers, you have a right to reach out and let us know when you have some suggestions or questions on anything that you see. I mean, in this case, it's not a decision that's being made tomorrow, meaning the final who comes into the position. So we always want to make meaningful gain.
I'd also echo that there's an email that went out today. This meeting has been published on the website, and we've been harping on the timeline for months. I don't know if rain has a situation. People would rather, watch it, online. If I looked at a lot of the videos, seem to be getting a lot more views recently in terms of folks tuning in and paying attention. So if you look back, maybe I don't know, a few months back, you'll see a few views, and it seems to be elevating. So I think that there obviously is, a lot of interest, and I think that the surveys are proof of that. Did any other board members have anything that they wanted to say? Okay.
I would.
Yeah.
So I would like to thank everybody in the community that reached out through the surveys. I think that people may have kind of questioned the number of times they got texts and things like that, but I can assure you it's because we genuinely want as much input as we can so that as a Board of Education, when we make this decision ultimately, we are reflecting the values that this community finds important. I do understand that there may be people who have certain degrees of frustration, and understand that we get that. And our goal at this point is to get the best leader we can for the district, as Chris was saying. We are not taking this lightly. I will admit that I am new to the Board of Education, but I am not new to Wall Township and the schools, and my involvement is not new. And I know that speaking from myself, I will be doing everything that I can, and I feel very confident that my fellow board members are also committed to the process of developing a profile that's going to best serve the interest of our students first and foremost. And in doing that, also meeting the needs of the educators and administrators in the district, and also our townspeople. I think to suggest that there has been a candidate chosen is really, I think it's rash, I think it's irresponsible, and that has not happened. And I want to make that very clear. We don't even have a profile set yet. So to suggest that something's decisions have already been made, that's completely, wholly, and totally inaccurate. So I just want to make that point, and I agree with Andy. We want to reflect our community, and we're going to do what's best for the kids. And I can tell you that I'm going to do the best I can, and I feel very sure I have no reason to believe anyone else sitting on this board is not going to do the same. So I appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.
One last comment I'll make is when we're looking at the characteristics of who we're looking for in the next superintendent, a lot of that was honesty, integrity, leadership qualities. Those are not things that you specifically find on a piece of paper and something that you review. Those are things that you drill down and you find in an interview process. And I believe that this board is vibrant in understanding people. I think we have a lot of different skill sets, and I think that we're able to rely on each other for that. I think that where some folks might have not as strong suits there, it's made up over here, right? So in terms of the board as a whole, I really do believe that we are in a very good position for this interview process. And I look forward to lots and lots of applications because I think they're going to come in. And I think that that's going to be fantastic, and we're going to do this school district proud.
Chris, I'd just like to say one last thing as well. So there was a comment made that there's a lot of people in town that don't have confidence in the 8 people selecting the superintendent. And while I understand that from the history that's gone on, what I'd like to say is that, as many of you have already said, this board is committed to being diverse in our process and open in our process, and that we're open to hear your complaints about your lack of confidence, to speak up. We've been in touch with both unions that represent the majority of the staff in the district, and we're trying to be as open as we can. So we're here to earn your confidence through this process, and one great way to earn confidence is to set a good example, which we're trying to do with our partners in SEA, but to also have open dialogue. So if you have things you'd like to say, please come to the meetings or find one of us in email or in person and let us know, as was said previously. Thank you.
We will be going back to executive session, and there will be no... Apologies. Anybody else for public comment? Seeing none.
Close.
Close public comment.
So, you want to make a motion to move into executive session and announce that?
There- Regular public comment on the email was the public comment as per special presentations, which was the regular public comment.
This was just on the presentation. That was my public comment. You told me to keep it to the presentation.
No, the
Now we're gonna do regular public comment. That's on your agenda.
the public comment that we had, and
Read your agenda, Chris.
public comment open for the purpose of commenting on any school district issue.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Cross. 5 minutes, please.
You got it. I'm getting text messages. Somebody's texting, they think the comment should be public. So the comments, I mean, you should be able to narrow them down and summarize them. So, because where's the backup? I'm getting text messages from people here that are watching. So, and I think, you know, the questions that I went over, I think I deserve an answer to. So, how many seniors did you go to? How did you pick the high school seniors? Are you going to have these gentlemen sit in? Are you open to maybe having other people sit in? People prefer other people sitting in the back room while you're picking and interviewing, not just the 8 people. So, people are afraid to tell you that. I'm telling you it, okay? I had 3 OPA requests that were due from Mr. Smythe today. One of them is regarding the trailers. It's now February 10th. I finally now have a meeting with one of the people that I've been trying to get a meeting with. So I'm going to turn over all my information, so I hope you get over all of your information. Okay? It's taken a really, really long time. Some information's going in, it's going in, it's going in. So glad to see that's happening. What else? One was on executive minutes. Mr. Smythe, I'd like those, and I'd like all those emails back on the Central School trailers. The third one, I can't even think off the top of my head what it was, but I did send it in. Mr. Smythe reports into somebody, and somebody needs to be held accountable. That's the problem we're having. We have a superintendent, but nobody's responsible for anything. Nobody takes any blame for anything. Everything goes into a black hole, and people don't get answers. So that's why this district is in the mess we're in. So, you know, I think it is a great town. And I think we will get good applicants. I just want everybody to have a fair shot. And I didn't say that somebody was picked. So you insinuated that. I did not say that. I hope that nobody is picked. Everybody deserves a shot at this job. And I think probably one of the custodial people could do a great job. I think you just really needed to narrow that down. And I'm kind of surprised that it was so vague that nobody here said that before I said it. That's to me what's scary. Nobody said that. You need to narrow it down. What else? I think the other information I wanted, Mr. Smythe, was on the interest in the bank. So I had 2 bank statements I requested, and I did not get them back. So we're trying to get a handle on, you know, I think somebody was saying it's like something federal. You have to disclose your bank fees on a bank statement. And, you know, why were we having hidden bank fees eating away all this money that could have been spent on the kids all these years? So I want those bank statements tomorrow because I want somebody to look at those bank statements before we meet. So I'm going to be requesting all of the bank statements for like the last 7 years. So just start getting them out because it just doesn't even make any sense. I mean, nobody would have money in the bank with hidden fees. So why do you have our $20 million doing it? And I have the email that shows we were not supposed to be paying bank fees when we transferred to TD Bank. And then all of a sudden, we're paying all these bank fees. So I found those documents, and then Mr. Smythe can answer when did it change and when did he advise the board? Same thing with the information from these two gentlemen. Why didn't it go to Chris? Why would it go to Brian for the superintendent search? It should go to the board president. He disseminates it. It shouldn't go to the business administrator. Nothing, it's just so many things don't make sense over and over and over again. So I'd like that information back, Mr. Smythe. And everybody have a good night. Thank you.
Anybody else for a second public comment? Seeing none, can I get a motion?
Motion to move to executive session.
All in favor? All right, thank you.